cold wind swept through the dimly lit street, carrying with it the faint scent of roasted meat and baked bread. From the restaurant nearby, a little girl stood by the glass door, her thin frame trembling under an oversized coat that had long lost its color. Her feet were bare against the concrete, her toes pale and stiff from the cold. Through the glass, she could see the glow of chandeliers, people laughing, waiters gliding between tables with silver trays, the rich aroma of food thick in the air. Her stomach twisted painfully, a dull reminder that she hadn't eaten since the morning before last. She pressed her small hand against her belly, as if she could silence its protests. The glass fogged slightly from her breath as she leaned closer, watching a family share a chocolate dessert, the little boy giggling as whipped cream smeared across his cheek. For a moment, her lips curved into a faint smile before fading into longing. She had been standing there for almost an hour, gathering courage she wasn't sure she had. People walked past her, their shoes clicking sharply on the pavement, some glancing at her with pity, others not at all. She had learned not to expect kindness. But hunger was stronger than pride, and tonight it had pushed her to the edge. The door opened suddenly and a wave of warmth spilled out, carrying the hum of soft music. A tall man stepped out, his presence commanding yet calm, dressed in a dark overcoat that seemed to have never known the cold. He was talking to someone on his phone, his voice deep and measured, words clipped with precision. He looked like someone who belonged to another world entirely. A world where hunger didn't exist, where shoes shone and people never shivered. The girl hesitated, her heart racing. Her lips parted once, then closed again. She almost turned away, but the smell of food coming from the paper bag in his hand stopped her. Gathering every shred of courage she had left, she took a shaky step forward. "Mister," she called out softly, her voice barely rising above the sound of traffic. He didn't hear her. She swallowed hard, stepped closer, and tried again, a little louder this time. "Sir?" He turned his head slightly, his expression unreadable. She lowered her gaze immediately. "May I have your leftovers, sir?" The man blinked, momentarily caught off guard. He had heard many requests in his life. Business deals. Favors, flattery, but never something so fragile, so raw. For a moment he said nothing, just looked at her. Under the yellow streetlight, her face was pale, her hair tangled. Her eyes, large brown and shining, held a quiet desperation that words could never capture. He felt something stir inside him, a small, unfamiliar ache. The city noise seemed to fade. He studied the little hands clutching the hem of her coat, trembling slightly, and the faint hope in her eyes that flickered like a dying candle. He paused halfway down the sidewalk, the cool night air brushing against his face. The weight of the paper bag no longer in his hand left a strange emptiness in its place. He could have kept walking. His car was waiting, the driver already checking his watch, but something in him refused to move forward. He turned slightly and saw her still standing under the restaurant's golden light, clutching the bag to her chest as if it were a treasure. She didn't open it right away. She just stared at it, her lips pressed together, eyes glistening. Then slowly she sank onto the curb, knees drawn up, and began to unwrap the bag. Steam rose into the cold air as she opened the box. Her fingers trembled, but her face lit up in quiet wonder when she saw the food inside. Half a steak, a few roasted potatoes, a small piece of bread. To anyone else, it was nothing. To her, it was a feast. The man found himself watching her, unable to look away. She ate carefully, almost reverently, taking small bites as if afraid that finishing too quickly would make it vanish. Her eyes closed with each taste, her lips curling into a faint, disbelieving smile. It was such a simple thing, watching someone eat, but there was something deeply human about it, something he hadn't felt in years. A memory flickered in his mind. A young girl with bright hair laughing over spilled ice cream, his daughter years ago. The sound of her laughter had once filled his home, but it had been silent ever since the accident. He swallowed hard, pushing the memory away, but it clung stubbornly to the corners of his thoughts. He took a few steps back toward the restaurant before he even realized what he was doing. When he reached her, she looked up, startled, crumbs at the corner of her mouth. "It's all right," he said quickly, holding up a hand. "I didn't mean to scare you." Her eyes widened, and she froze mid-bite, unsure whether to run or stay. "I was just wondering." He hesitated, realizing how strange his words might sound. "Would you like to eat inside instead? It's warmer there." Her first reaction was disbelief. Inside, in that place of chandeliers and polished floors. She shook her head quickly, gripping the paper bag tighter. "No, sir. I'm fine here, really. Her voice quivered between politeness and fear. He crouched slightly to meet her eye level, his tone soft but firm. It's cold, and you look tired. You can sit by the window. I'll tell them it's fine. Something in his eyes, gentle but resolute, made her stop resisting. She nodded slowly, clutching the bag as she rose to her feet. Inside, the warmth hit her like a wave. Heads turned as the waiter frowned, unsure of what was happening, but the man's quiet command silenced any protest. He guided her to a small table near the back, away from curious eyes. The waiter approached hesitantly, and with a nod from the man, brought a steaming plate of fresh pasta, a bowl of soup, and a glass of water. The restaurant had begun to empty, leaving only a few quiet diners and the soft hum of a piano playing somewhere near the bar. Outside, rain had begun to fall, tracing silver lines down the window beside them. The girl Anna, she had whispered when he'd asked her name, was now eating more slowly, savoring each bite as though she wanted the moment to last forever. Her cheeks had gained a faint color, her eyes brighter now under the warm light. The man sat across from her, silent, hands folded before him. He wasn't sure what he was doing anymore. This was not part of any plan, not something a man of his stature would normally do. Yet something about this child made him feel that walking away earlier would have been a sin his heart could not bear. Are you warm enough? He asked softly. She looked up, startled, then nodded quickly, brushing a strand of damp hair from her face. Yes, sir, very warm. Thank you. Her voice was small but sincere. She looked around, her gaze flicking to the chandelier, the velvet chairs, the mirrored wall reflecting golden light. I've never been anywhere like this, she murmured almost to herself. He caught her words and something in his chest tightened. He wanted to ask her where she'd been, how she'd come to stand outside alone, but the question felt too heavy for this fragile calm. Still, he needed to know. Where do you stay, Anna? The words came gently, as if he were afraid of breaking her. She hesitated, setting down her fork. By the station sometimes, she said quietly. There's a bench near the corner. It's dry when it doesn't rain. Her eyes lowered to her lap. My mama used to work in a laundry, but she got sick. After she went away, I couldn't pay the rent. The man said I had to leave. She paused, swallowing hard. But it's okay. I can take care of myself. She tried to smile, but her voice trembled, betraying the truth her lips tried to hide. The man sat frozen, her words piercing through the layers of indifference he'd built around himself over the years. He had seen poverty before, from the tinted windows of cars, through charity reports and news headlines, but never like this. Not with a voice, not with eyes like hers. His throat tightened. He took a slow breath and asked quietly, How old are you? 10, she said after a pause. Maybe 11. She looked unsure, as though she'd stopped counting years when life had stopped giving her birthdays. For a long while they sat in silence. The rain outside grew heavier, tapping against the glass like a soft rhythm to their thoughts. He watched her push her plate away, full at last, her expression both grateful and sad. That was the best food I ever had, she said softly. I'll never forget it. She looked at him, then really looked, and in that gaze was a mixture of innocence and wisdom no child should have to carry. Why are you being kind to me? The rain poured harder as they stepped into the night, the city lights shimmering through the curtain of water. The man opened his umbrella and held it over both of them, but the wind caught the edges, sending cold droplets against their faces. The girl clung to the paper bag she still carried, though it was now nearly empty, a symbol of the moment that had changed her evening, and perhaps her life. They walked in silence for a while, their footsteps echoing softly on the wet pavement. Cars hissed by, splashing water onto the roadside, but he kept her close to his side, making sure no wave of mud touched her. Where are we going, sir? She asked quietly, her voice trembling with uncertainty. Somewhere dry, he replied, his tone steady but gentle. You'll rest there tonight. She looked up at him with cautious hope. A shelter? She asked. Better, he said, glancing down at her with a faint smile. Somewhere safe. The black car waited at the corner, headlights cutting through the rain. The driver, startled at the sight of the small, soaked girl, opened his mouth to speak but stopped when he saw the look in his employer's eyes. Without a word, the man guided her into the car, wrapping his coat around her shoulders before taking his seat beside her. The warmth of the car heater filled the space quickly, She rubbed her hands together, eyes wide as she looked around. The leather seats gleamed, and the faint scent of cologne and fresh linen filled the air. "Is this your car?" she asked, awe in her tone. He nodded slightly. "Yes." As the car pulled away, the city lights blurred outside the window. For the first few minutes, neither spoke. The girl leaned her head against the seat, exhaustion softening her small features. He watched her from the corner of his eye, feeling a strange protectiveness rising within him, a feeling that both comforted and frightened him. He had spent years learning how to forget, how to keep his heart numb. Yet this child, whom he'd met less than an hour ago, was quietly dismantling that numbness without even trying. When the car finally stopped before a tall iron gate, Anna sat up straight, startled. Beyond the gate, a long driveway curved through a garden illuminated by soft lights. At the end stood a grand house, its windows glowing warmly against the rain-darkened sky. "This is where I live," he said simply, stepping out and opening her door. She hesitated, looking from the gate to him. "I can't go in there," she whispered. "It's too nice. I'll make it dirty." He smiled gently. "A home isn't meant to stay clean. It's meant to be lived in." Morning light spilled gently through the curtains, painting the room in shades of gold. The rain had stopped, leaving the world outside washed clean and still. Anna stirred beneath the blanket, her small hands clutching the edge as her eyes blinked open. For a moment she didn't remember where she was. Then, seeing the high ceiling and the soft armchair beside the window, it all came rushing back. The restaurant, the man, the warm bath, the kindness she had thought existed only in dreams. In the next room, Mr. Harris stood by the window, a cup of coffee cooling in his hands. He hadn't slept much. All night he'd thought about the girl sleeping under his roof, the courage it took for her to survive, and the strange twist of fate that had brought her into his life. When he heard the faint creak of the door, he turned. She stood there shyly, dressed in clothes far too big for her, her hair brushed neatly by the housekeeper. "Good morning," he said with a small smile. "Did you sleep well?" She nodded. "It was like sleeping inside a dream," she whispered. He gestured for her to sit, and a servant brought in breakfast, fresh bread, eggs, fruit. She stared at the spread in awe before looking up. "Is all this for me?" He nodded again. "Eat. You don't have to hurry." As she ate, he finally asked, "Anna, what would you say if I helped you go to school again? If you stayed here for a while?" Her fork froze mid-air, her eyes wide. "Stay here?" she echoed softly. "But why would you do that?" He took a deep breath. "Because everyone deserves a chance to start again," he said simply. "And maybe I do too." Tears welled in her eyes, not from sadness but from a joy too big for words. She rose from her chair and hugged him, hesitant at first, then tightly, as though she feared he might disappear. For a moment he stood still, then gently wrapped his arms around her. When he looked into her eyes, he saw not the hunger or fear he'd first seen, but something new, hope, bright and alive. And in that gaze he felt his heart begin to heal. What had started as a small act of kindness had become a miracle for them both.